Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. As the title of the video says, today we're going to be sculpting a cake in Nomad. If you guys follow me on TikTok or Instagram, then you know I've been posting a lot of these sculpted cakes that I make in Nomad, and I figured I'd make a full-length tutorial for you guys. So let's get started. Okay, so first things first, to make the base of our cake, we're going to delete the sphere and start with a cylinder. And then for our cylinder, I usually play with the division settings to make it rounded. And usually I play between the division on the X and the post subdivisions until I get it to that roundness that I like. So something like this. And then I don't validate it until I'm completely done sculpting the cake, just in case I want to make changes later. And this is completely personal preference, but I usually just kind of make my cake the color from the get-go, just because, I don't know. I guess it helps you visualize the cake better. Okay, and then to create the first little base swirls, I'm going to add a sphere. And let's bring it out. I'm going to scale that down, and I'm going to validate it as it is. So for the texture that I have on my cake swirls, I use a custom alpha mat, which I created in Procreate, and it's actually quite simple. And I guess I'll go into that and show you guys how I did that. So I'm going to jump into Procreate and then show you guys how I made that. Okay, so I'm inside of Procreate, and I'm just using a square canvas. It doesn't really matter what size it is. I have it set to 2048 by 2048, but you could get away with something smaller. I'm going to flood the background with a black color. And then on a new layer, I want to create a circle. And that's just going to be my brush. And then I try to make the circle take up as much space as it can, but without touching the edges of our canvas, of course. And then on top of that, I'm going to create a new layer using a black shade, or almost black. I'm going to start drawing a grid of lines. Okay, so I'm just using a basic outline brush so that I could create some pretty thick lines. And if you press and hold in Procreate, it'll give you a straight line. And this is just, again, personal preference, or up to what you think will look good. I honestly didn't really use any sort of guides for this. I just kind of experimented and made a couple of these until I was happy with the results I got. So once you're happy with the shape you've created, you just want to share and export as a JPEG or a PNG. And then in Nomad, I'll show you how to use that for your brush. Okay, so in Nomad, I use the brush tool because it sculpts. And as you can see, I already have something on here, but under the alpha settings here in the next to the stroke settings, you can actually import from your photos or your files any image that you've created, and you want to import a black and white image. So as you can see here, I have a couple different brushes I've experimented with. Okay, so I'm just going to choose this one that has 4 grid lines, and I'm going to kind of turn my radius up and make sure my symmetry is turned off, and then just draw right across that sphere. And then I'll smooth it out gently. I don't want to get rid of the detail I've just created, but I also don't want it to be super rough on the edges. And then lastly, I'm going to kind of use my move tool to drag it out into that more of like an almond shape. And then here I might want to turn my symmetry on, but probably at my Y scale to bring these two closer. And that's how you get that nice shape. Now, of course, the back is going to look kind of funky, so I'm just going to kind of push that into itself. But we won't really see that, so it doesn't really matter. And I'm sorry if you can hear my dog in the background. She's sassy. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna put this closer to my cake, like where I would want the piping to be. So like around here probably. And then I'm going to add a radio repeater. And that's going to become the parent of that shape I just created. And I'm gonna up the count on my Y. And that's gonna give us that really nice piping. And then you could still click on your shape and edit it accordingly. So I typically like to kind of rotate it a little bit. Let's see. Maybe like that. You could also like scale it if you want to. But I think for now that looks good to me. I'm probably gonna change the color on it, so let's probably make it a different shade of pink, like a lighter pink. Okay. And then this is also extra and personal preference, but I'm gonna create like the little plate that this cake sits on. And I'm just gonna do that by duplicating this cake cylinder shape. So I'm just gonna hit the clone. And then with my gizmo tool, I'm gonna move it down. And I'm gonna edit the size of that with these little nodes. And then I can still edit the subdivisions here and make it a little bit more, not as soft on the corners. And it looks like a hat, but I'm going to change the color to like white probably. And that way it looks more like a plate. And that's good enough for now. I'm also not, I guess I can validate it, but let me, something like that. Okay, so now I'm gonna create some like smaller piping on top of this one, and I'm going to follow pretty much the same process. I'm gonna insert another sphere. Scale it down. I'm going to validate it, and I guess I should have subdivided, it's fine. Subdivide it, and using my brush tool, I could use the same one. I guess I'm going to use a different one for some variety. And turn off the symmetry. And then smooth. Oh, that looks funky. And then I'm gonna just pull out the edges again, push this in, and let me see if I can. And then just bring it back in towards the cake, and then I'm gonna scale this one so it's smaller than our previous shape. You could also scale, you know, up or the long way. I think something like that. And then I'm gonna paint it while I have it here, and maybe like a more darker pink, like that. And then I'm gonna do, again, add a radio repeater, and then just up the count on the Y. And then even though we did the same approach, it looks very different, just because of having less lines on that alpha. So that's one thing I like about it, because I'm able to make different kind of piping looks, even using the same techniques. And then again, just play with like rotating it and seeing how to make it fit into itself better. If you want to make it bigger. But I think that looks good for now. Okay, and I typically work like I do the bottom and then I'll do the top and then I'll fill in the middle last. because the middle is typically where there's like most detail. I guess that depends, but for this cake, I feel like I want to bring this to the top also. So that's pretty simple. I just kind of click on that radial shape, which is, let me see, it's this guy here. Okay, so and then I'll hit clone, and that should duplicate that object, and then I'll just use the gizmo tool to bring it up to where I want it. And then I'm gonna kind of, I'm gonna bring it down a little bit below the very top of that cake because I'm gonna be adding more piping to that. Looking cute. And then it really bothers me to see these little icons, and I honestly don't know if there's a way to like hide that. So typically I just have to validate my objects so that we no longer see those symbols. So I'm just gonna do that. I'm gonna hit validate, and then typically I just join the children, and that's because I don't want each of these spheres to be individual objects in my timeline, in my scene. I want them all to just, I want this entire ring to just be considered as a shape, a single shape. So I will click on join children, and I'll confirm that, and then now that ring is an object in itself. I'm going to do the same for this one, join children, and I'm going to leave this one because I might want to duplicate one of these guys later and use it for something else. We'll see, but for now that's fine. That's less distracting. Okay, and then for our top here piping, I kind of want to do like a bigger, like more chunkier version of these guys. So let's add another sphere, and same thing, we're just gonna like scale it down, and I'm going to validate, subdivide, and then I'm gonna use probably use this one again that has more lines to it. So again, I would recommend that when you are making your little alpha mats, to just make different versions of it. I also have a square one, which honestly I don't know. I don't think it's really much of a difference than from this one. But yeah, just play with the amount of lines, the width, the thickness of each of them, and see what you can come up with. But I'm going to kind of go at an angle this time. So instead of it just being straight across, I'm just going to kind of swoop it. And I also sometimes like to do all the sides just in case. I'm going to solo that so that I can work around it easier. And then I'm going to soften it very gently. And as you can see, this is like very experimental, and it's just a lot of tweaking and playing with these spheres and these little shapes that you can create, and having them give you that effect of like a piping. And I guess what I like about cakes and piping is that it really is that too. I feel like in real life, in cake piping, it's not necessarily perfect, or it's very organic. The shapes are very organic. They're very fun, and so it kind of, it's okay that it's not perfect. Okay, and then similarly to the other ones, we want to scale that down. Probably going to rotate this one a little bit since we didn't add any lines to the bottom. We want to kind of keep that hidden from view. And then I'm going to, once again, just add a radial repeater to that shape and bring the count up. Now that looks a little bit like too much. I'm going to play with the rotation again. I like that view better. I'm going to scale down my shape, and then inside of my radial settings, I'm going to add more because I see that I have some gaps in between them. As you can see, it's kind of, we're still seeing some of the cake, but that's just a simple fix of pulling your shape out a little bit more. You could also scale it up, bring it into the cake so that it's kind of sitting in there. I might even just bring this one up more. And then for the color of this, I wanted to match this color down here. So I'm using my eyedropper tool, and then I'm gonna hit paint all, and it's gonna fill that shape in. And I'm not really liking the way this, like the inside of the cake is looking, of the shape. So I'm going to just go back and add another stroke of that brush. And I only have to do it to one because it is in a radial repeater. It'll replicate that to all of my shapes, and I think that looks much better. I'm gonna save my project, and then we're gonna move on to the middle of the cake here and make maybe some more fun shapes. Let's see. Another simple thing you can do is using your tube tool on the curve. I'm going to just draw a simple little, so I drew that tube inside of this radial repeater. I didn't mean to do that, so I'm just gonna pull it out. And I do like to give all of my shapes their own radial parent. I don't like to like just use a single repeater and kind of shove all the shapes in there, because not all of them are gonna have the same settings, right? Some of them might need more or less shapes. Some of them might need to be scaled up or down. So it's good to just keep them separate, in my opinion. But I'm gonna move this tube thing out here because I can't really see what's going on. And then you can turn snapping on, which is right here. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna snap your shape to a surface, your closest surface here, which would be the cake. I honestly don't use snapping a whole ton because I feel like it's a little bit annoying. It's good to do that, but it's only, as I'm doing this, it's also kind of tweaking my shape and moving it, not just, excuse me, it's not just moving my shape on the Z-axis, but it's also kind of messing up my X and Y. So I don't really use snapping a lot, but that's because I think I validated that. Okay. But that's because I don't find these nodes hard to work with. Like I can tweak them and nothing crazy is really happening. So I just keep snapping off. And then I make sure that I'm using a B-spline, and that's just gonna, technically smooth out the connections between each of these nodes. So that's good to keep in mind. Let's see, and then I'm just going to do something like this. Now this is really thick, so I'm gonna bring that radius down a bit, and probably doesn't need to be touching the cake up there, but maybe something like this. And let's see, we can put that out, bring this out a little bit. And like, you see what I mean? I don't have snapping on, but it's not necessarily difficult to work with these nodes. Like, they're not going all crazy places. So we're gonna do that for now. And then I'm going to, again, I'm gonna click my tube tool and add another radial repeater. And then I'm just gonna bring that up until they kind of meet at the corners. Now it may not be perfect, and that's okay because we can still edit our shape. And I'm going to just kind of bring them so they touch each other. And that's just gonna help sell the vision here. Now I don't usually just like leave them like that. I think we'll end up adding a little like a pearl or some other kind of shape here to hide the connection of our little strings here. But something like that, and that's a fairly simple shape to make, but it's very, I guess, iconic in these types of vintage Lambeth style cakes. Like, you will always see this little like swoops. And let's paint them. I'm just gonna do this color here. I think will be good for now. Honestly, a lot of the time I end up changing my colors once I'm in like the rendering phase. That's not really important, but I still like to just kind of visualize things. So we're gonna do that, and again, this symbol is really annoying to me at least, so I'm just gonna start validating some of these other shapes that I haven't yet. So which one's this one? Those are those tubes. I'm gonna leave that. And then I'm going to validate our top here. Join the children. There we go. Okay. Cute. So let's create that pearl, and that's honestly probably the easiest thing about this whole cake, and that is just simply a sphere. So we're gonna create a sphere, scale it down, and then we're gonna place it at each of these intersections here. Okay, and then for these pearls, you could manually place them on each intersection if you wanted to, or you could just use the radial repeater again, which is what I'm gonna do. And that should get them exactly where you need them. Okay, and then for the pearls, I'm just gonna make a material for them by turning the roughness up, the metalness all the way up, and then adjusting the roughness. You can create like a pearl effect. So I'm just gonna do something like that and paint them. And then I'm gonna validate that radial, which is this one here, so that I don't see that icon anymore. And that looks good. And then I want to create some kind of like teardrop, a shape that comes down from that pearl that we just made. So I'm going to add a sphere, and we're going to scale it down. And it's going to be pretty much same process that we did for all of our other piping, using my brush tool with that alpha that I created. Let's do this one. And then I'm going to just solo that so it's easier to see. Brush tool. 1, 2. Smooth. And then I'm going to use the move tool to bring it up. So something like that. And then you can just adjust the shape to your personal liking. I'm going to push this in. And then I'm going to place it right underneath that sphere. So I'm going to have to just play with the rotation a little bit and push it in there. Scale it down. So something like that, and then again, you're going to add it into your radial repeater and play with the count on the y-axis, and it should just again land exactly where you need it to. And then I'll go ahead and paint that. Maybe this color. Let's see. No, I think I look better. Lighter color. Alright, there. Okay, and then I'm going to actually duplicate these curves using clone, and then I'm going to hit align so that my gizmo tool is aligned, and I'm just going to bring those down so I can create another set of those. And I think for this one, I'm going to make it a tad smaller, maybe like thinner, so bring the radius down. Go back to the gizmo and probably bring it up a little bit. And then I'm going to actually adjust the nodes on the curve so it looks like they're kind of intersecting at the beginning point. So just bring everything in a little bit. And so something like that. I might need to adjust this shape so it's not, oh, I validated it. Okay, well, I could probably move it with the move tool out a little bit. And then I think I'm gonna make this one smaller too. And I think that looks a lot better. Okay, so now we're gonna create a sort of draping effect for the cake, and I actually discovered this on accident one day, but it looked really cool, so I'll show you guys how I did it. And I'm actually just gonna grab one of these spheres that we created for our base piping, and I'm gonna duplicate it. So again, using the clone tool, I'm just gonna drag it out. Now it's duplicating the entire ring because it has been cloned underneath that radial effector, so I'm just gonna pull it out, and that way it's no longer being affected by the radial. And then let me just maybe scale it down a little bit. So what you're gonna do is use the move tool and bring your radius up a bit, and then you're just gonna pull down. Make sure that the symmetry is off, but you're gonna just kind of pull that down. And then just really adjust it a little bit like that. But it kind of looks like something's being draped, and that's what you want. So I'm gonna just bring this in a little bit and try and make it look a little bit more symmetrical, although it's not a big deal because it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm just gonna bring it up here. I think I want it to be a little bit bigger and maybe kind of sit in the same place where we have our curves here, except we want it to be at the very top of the cake here. And I'm just gonna try and put those so they don't really stick out of the cake, but they're kind of tucked into that pipe. And you can adjust it to your liking, but I'm gonna leave it like that, and then I'm gonna add another radial repeater to that, and then just bring that in until they're touching at the edges here. And I might need to just still use my move tool to get them to kind of line up as best as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm trying for them to look like they're at least touching. And it's intersecting with what we already have created here, so I'm gonna grab those and move them down. So these guys, and I should have named my layers probably, so this would have been easier, but let's see. Okay, so it should be these three, and I'm just gonna slide them down. And I'm seeing that this guy's kind of sticking, it's not really touching the cake, so I'm gonna just scale that in a little bit. And I could also rotate if I want to kind of change where this sits on the cake. Let's see. So we'll do something like that, and then if you don't like how this is kind of not matching, it's not centering, you could always play with the scale of these shapes and then bring down the amount of duplicates that you have. And then I'm gonna bring it back into the cake again. I'm gonna scale the whole thing in a little bit. And I'm kind of fine with that, honestly. I'll probably move these shapes again a little bit lower, so because some of these are touching, or maybe I'll just bring this in some more. Again, you could always use the move tool on just one of the shapes, and everything else is gonna follow because it's being duplicated, or repeated rather. Okay, so again, I'm gonna bring these guys down using the gizmo tool so nothing's intersecting. and I think that's more like it. Okay, and then the next thing we're gonna do just to fill in some of these spaces is to create some like dotting, which is fairly simple. So again, we're gonna create a sphere. And I guess we'll stay on the right. Scale that down. And then we're gonna make this quite small. I'm just kind of seeing the size. I think that's good. And then we're just gonna put that into, actually not a radial repeater, but we're gonna use the curve repeater. And what the curve repeater does, it's going to repeat your object on a curve instead of a radial. And you could shape the curve to your liking. So I'm going to just create that kind of arc to mirror the tubes we already have here. And let's see. Just kind of bring these in a little bit so they're sitting not exactly where the pearl is, but a little bit below that. And then I'm going to put my count up, and I want something kind of like that. I don't want them to touch. And again, this is all personal preference and however you want your cake to look, but this is just what I'm gonna do for now. And I'm gonna scale them down a little. I think they're still too big. And I'm gonna push them out too, because they're kind of in that cake a little bit too far, I think. Then once you have them sitting where you'd like, I'm gonna color them real quick and maybe make them a little bit darker pink. I think it might be a little bit too dark. Something like that. And then I'm gonna add that a radial repeater on top of that. And then what that's gonna do is, okay, that's not what I want. That's weird. Hold up. Okay, so we did it. We want to make sure our curve is selected, not our sphere, and then we're gonna add that curve into a radial repeater. And so then now it's just gonna duplicate that entire shape, and then we can adjust our count to make it sit where we want. And I apparently erased my little teardrops at some point. I don't know when, so I'm just gonna remake those. It happens. All right, so spheres, scale it down. I'm gonna validate and subdivide. Use my brush tool to draw some little lines to create some texture. Another thing you can keep in mind is you can use it in the subtract mode instead, and that will also give you a different look to your object. So let's do that for this. And then smooth it out. And then pull it up again. I think here the symmetry might be, no. Okay. Here we go. I'm gonna turn symmetry on locally so that it is symmetrical to the shape, not to the world, because my shape is no longer centered. And I'm gonna turn symmetry on the Y. Hello, maybe not on the X was fine, yeah. And then again, the back looks crazy, so we're just gonna tuck it in a little. And soften some more. That's a little bit too much, I think. Okay. And then we'll just place it accordingly. Scale it down a bit. We gotta rotate it. Scale. I'm gonna bring it out so it's not sitting so deep in the cake. Scale accordingly. And I'm just gonna adjust it until I'm happy. I'm gonna bring it some more at the tip and then bring this out a little bit more so it fits better in between these curves. And then I'm going to paint it a bit more pink. And then again, we'll add it to our radial repeater, which is not cooperating. All right, let's switch this back to world and let's try that again. Add radial, there we go. Okay, so if your symmetry is happening oddly, like it's duplicating along your existing object, then it's because you have the symmetry on your object to set to local instead of world, so just keep that in mind. And then I'm going to bring my count up again to 6. And there we go. And then to finish this off, we're gonna make some cherries at the top. So I'm gonna create the little swirls that the cherries sit on top of. And to do that, I use the tube tool and curve, and I just draw a straight line. And then I want to use the spiral setting, which is up here in the 3 dots in your curve settings. And I'm just going to check spiral and up my twist angle so I get at least 3 swirls. And then I'm going to use my gizmo to rotate this and snap it 90 degrees. And then I'm just gonna place this on my cake at the top here. And I want it to be wider, so I could just use my gizmo tool to you know, scale that out a bit more. And then I could probably bring this, let's see. You could actually use the radius here as well instead of using the gizmo scale. Let's see, something like that. And then I can bring this shape up as well, the curve, the node. And then I can play with the twist angle a little bit more. So I like that shape, so I'm going to use this to just scale the overall shape down a little because it's too big. And then I want something like that. Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to validate that, and I'm actually going to use our brush tool again with our little lines to give it some texture. So I'm going to subdivide that shape. Okay, so you want to make sure it has enough divisions in there so that when you do the brush strokes, they actually show up, and then when you smooth, you don't completely lose the detail. So I'm just gonna follow our curve shape here and make some of these lines, and I have my brush set to subtract so that I'm carving into it instead of bringing it out. And this is very rough. As you can see, it's not really meant to be perfect, but alright. And then you're going to use the smooth tool to just kind of lightly soften some of those hard edges. And I don't really like that how the edge here is finished, so sometimes I just kind of use the move tool to try and tuck that in there. And it may not matter a whole lot because we're going to make a cherry that sits on top, so it's not really going to show all that much, but it's just something I do. So something like that I think looks better. And you can kind of add some more texture to that with the brush tool, smooth. Yeah, so something like that, and then we'll color it maybe this side, the same color as these little dots here. I think that's cute. And then we're gonna add that swirl into a radial repeater, and then you could just play with the amount that you want, and we can do 6 of them. Then I'm going to scale it because it's kind of sticking out of the cake a little too much. I'm going to bring it in, maybe down a little as well. And our cherries are pretty simple. All you need is, again, a sphere. Okay, so I turned my radial symmetry on for all the axes, and then that way everything, the shape will adjust accordingly. And I'm gonna kind of bring the top and bottom in a little bit. I'm gonna solo it so I can see better. Okay, that's kind of funky. We'll do it on the Y only. Kind of looks like a tooth or an apple. Okay. Do something like that. I'm gonna round it a bit more. And then I'm going to smooth it out overall. I'm going to bring the top in a little bit more at the very center. Something like that. Smooth it out. And that's pretty much the shape. I'll make it a little bit wider on that side. And then we'll just paint it. Make it shiny, more like a plumish color. Okay, there you go. And then for our little stem, it's pretty simple, just using the tube tool curve to just draw a little stem out. And I want it to be sitting in that center of that cherry, so we'll just move it like so, and then I'll make it a lot thinner. And then you could use a different radius so that it can kind of be a little bit more, I guess, realistic. And then you could also play with the divisions if you want to kind of round out the stem a little bit, like so. So bring down the division on the X and bring the post subdivisions up a bit. And then I'm just going to paint it the same color as our cherry. I'm going to grab both of those and I'm going to group them so that they kind of move together, and then that group I'm going to throw inside of a radial. But first I'm going to actually place the cherry where I want it to go. I'm going to scale it down. Probably there, I think looks good. And the little swirls might be a little too big still. So I can just click that and scale it down a little bit. And then grab our cherry group again and adjust it accordingly. Okay. So once you place that cherry, again, clicking on the cherry group, you're gonna add a radial repeater and bring it up until you have enough count to fit on those little swirls. And that is your finished vintage style Lambeth cake. Right after this video, I'm going to film a tutorial on how to prep and export your model. So I do typically render outside of Nomad. So I'll show you guys how I prepare my model to export it and render it on my computer. So if you guys are interested in learning about that, then check out the following video. And don't forget to like this video, it really helps a lot. And don't forget to subscribe as well so that you guys don't miss on any content. I appreciate all the love and support. And as always, leave any questions, comments, anything you want to see in the future down below. Thank you guys again, and happy sculpting.